that. But Hank Jones, actually a good friend of mine, all of ours in the Mid-South, he's a consultant in Louisiana, and he's going to kick this off. He has a lot of experience from a consultant's perspective dealing with red banded, and I told him to take as much time as he wants. He can take all the time; it don't matter. No. Then we'll move on, and I got a few slides if there's time willing. But again, y'all ask questions, anything you want. It's very informal. So I don't know if we're supposed to start that or if it's started. I guess it's filming now. They'll hear about Darren.
They'll have two times at this.
All right, so there's your deal.
All right.
It's all on you.
There is CEU sign up in the back. Gus has got it. I guess if y'all need credits for that, that's fine. I beg y'all, let's keep this as informal as we can. You have got a world of entomological expertise in this room with Gus, Angus, and Don, Whitney, and some others in here. So please, we can take advantage of a lot of good folks and good advice in here today. So this is the exact same talk that I put together for short course in 2016. Made a few amendments. But the reason I kind of wanted to revisit this talk was to see how much of it was true and how much of it wasn't true after everybody else has had a chance to experience them like we've been having. And so hopefully some of these themes will kind of ring true and kind of lend some light. So anyway, this is my daughter Stella. She is 9 years old. This was, I guess, put together a couple years ago. And she's my firstborn, and she's a mild-tempered little girl, and really sweet. And but she can get mouthy every now and then. She complains a bunch, and so every now and then I gotta get her back in line. But it doesn't take much to get her back in line, once it gets started. So she's kind of like a green stink bug, Not going to give you too much trouble. If she does give you trouble, you can get her back in line pretty fast, so nothing to worry about there. This is the caboose right here, Nina. Like I said, she likes those hands on the hips. If y'all got daughters, that's all sass. Little girls are born women. They're never little girls. They're just little women is what they are. But anyway, she's a little bit more of a troublemaker than the rest of them. Makes a little bit more of a mess. She's going to tend to things a little bit different than her older sister. But anyway, she's a good, sweet kid, but it takes a little bit more. You might have to jump on her once or twice and try to get her to line up and act right. Kind of like a brown stink bug. A little bit worse than a green, but not as bad as some of the other stink bugs that we tend with. Then you got hell on earth, too. And this is my son, Owen. He's ready for combat. He's ready for mud. In this picture right here, that's not summer. I mean, it was actually cold outside that day. I mean, he just goes out there. I mean, you get loudspeaker calls at Sam's trying to locate the parents of Owen Jones. And regardless of what you do, you can get on him at 8 o'clock in the morning. I can tear his tail up. By 8:15, I'm having to do it again. 9:30, I'm having to do it again. It's never ending. He's my red banded, and so it's a never-ending, seemingly onslaught after time whenever he gets revved up. So we'll kind of dive into some nuts and bolts on some of this stuff, and a lot of this stuff, y'all, I've stolen, and so full credit to LSU Ag Center and their entomologists for sharing some of this stuff with me. So where did they come from? They started showing up in Louisiana in the early 2000s. There's a bunch of beans grown down here in this area down here. So, they've migrated north. Every now and then that's the line in which they've been found. And so, I mean, it looks like they're probably moving maybe 100 miles north every year. Now, this data stops in 2006. That's over 10 years ago. And so, like I said, they've steadily moved north. But there's limitations to what they do. And Angus is going to really dive into this piece of data right here. But and the biggest question that we have right now is, has the cold weather that we've experienced here in the last couple of weeks, has it done any good to kill these stink bugs? I will tell you that it has. Richard Costello's in the room. We consult in the same circle, Northeast Louisiana. We've gone through these years where we've had them bad, we get a good winter, and they'll show up. If they show up September-ish, they're not going to be near the issue. from experience. But anyway, so there was a scientist at LSU that put a bunch of stink bugs in a freezer and tried to supercool them, yada, yada, yada. Angus can explain that better than I can. But so he found that 23 degrees, you can kill 50% of them after about 4 hours and about 90% of them after 7 hours at 23 degrees. But now this is in a freezer. So that does not accurately depict what we're going to find out in Mother Nature. But it's a good starting point. At least you kind of have some guideline to go by. But so anyway, even at 32 degrees, this tropical insect, it took a week to see 95% mortality. So whenever we first started seeing these stink bugs several years ago, and Richard, you help me remember, was it 2008? I mean, I forget when it was, but anyway, we did not differentiate red bandits from greens and browns the first year we had them. You know, we were just like, we got enough stink bugs, and we really didn't go anything. We raised our thresholds beyond R6, and we were using the same sampling techniques. Now, that's probably where I'm going to spend a good bit of my time today, because the entomology group, they've figured this out now. Some of this stuff I want to talk about today is sampling techniques and doing some other things. Anyway, what I was talking about, this bug does not work. Like the other one. This is just kind of anecdotal data that I just threw on a slide. You know, your greens and your browns, y'all, they're going to grow gradually. Then, boom, after 2 or 3 weeks, you'll have an explosion of greens and browns you'll have to finally take care of. You may show up, you know, 1 week, and I got a couple, then they like triple overnight. Then you spray them, they go down, and then boom, they explode back on you again. I mean, the dynamics that this stink bug has, really nothing at all like the other stink bugs, browns and greens, that we have to contend with. Come on in. So 2 times, I looked it up, and 2 times, 2009 and in 2013, LSU made threshold changes. You know, in response to, we were just seeing too much damage and yield loss. But one of the things, you know, we learned more about the population dynamics and the biology of this pest is one of the main reasons that we responded in turn to them lowering the thresholds. And really, the yield loss is there. It's going to happen in a certain period of time. The damage is what we were most worried about. Is, you know, there's a longer period of time in which that bug's going to cause damage. I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but, you know, this is just showing different levels of infestation on beans from R3 to R8. You can, well, if I can learn how to use a pointer, you can start seeing these bugs get really damaging. But you see your green stems right there, 60% green stems, damaged seeds 69. There's a cost associated with that right there. But those green stems, if you don't have a draper header on a combine, you're in a world of misery whenever you start trying to cut green beans. And then if you keep them clean, it makes a big difference. Now 16%, now one of the things that I'll say, a lot of these beans, when you say 16% damage, these are like hand harvested beans, and you know, they don't get a chance to blow out the back end of a combine in university research most of the time. So some of those, you know, numbers are going to be elevated, but you know, it's definitely a big difference when you start looking at the seed damage. You know, whenever you start maintaining them pretty clean. But that 0% green stems, that means a lot of happy farmers. And then you just got rotten beans if you know, let them get out of hand. So that's the gist of it right there. If you control all you got to do is control them. We've got the methods to control them. Our insecticides work fine. I have no problems with the way, you know, these insecticides work. It's just being able to get out there, find them in time, get them killed, and hope and pray that the weather doesn't take away anything from you. I'm going to go through this. All right, so after the first few times that we, you know, had to deal with these back 2008, 2009, and early on, you know, one of the things, and Richard can chime in on this as much as I can, we would go out there and say, well, man, we didn't even have a red bandit out here last week, and we're sweeping up a threshold of these things. Where did they come from? Like I said, you would have near threshold levels would occur just instantly. And the damage at that time around R5, you know, that's their main time that they're going to cause your yield loss is right there at R5. And so if you miss them, yeah, you've had your yield loss, and it can happen just like that. And what we were finding too is that there was a resurgence that occurred within 7 days of spraying. I mean, you would spray and boom, they'd be right back again. So this is where I want to spend my time. We were sampling incorrectly. You know, we were using sweep nets, and these bugs had come in and gotten underneath low in the canopy. And so when you're sweeping up there in the top, you're not catching these things because they have laid their eggs and they are down low. And so we had to start rethinking, you know, I guess, how are we going to determine when they're out there? Because if you, a 1 week difference can make a lot of difference. And so, you know, one thing that we kind of started doing is trying to key in on, hey, when can we start looking for egg masses earlier? Can we get down the canopy and start sampling down low? And I think that benefits all of us that do it because, you know, they're not hard to find once you start learning how to find those things. In fact, many of y'all sampled beans, y'all probably saw them this summer. You know, they look exactly like that. Every one of the, I mean, every single egg mass you're going to see is going to look just like that, laid in 2 rows, little black specks. Most time going to be low in the canopy, you know, maybe halfway up. You'll find it halfway up. And like I said, that to me was the biggest indicator that I was missing them whenever I started going out there, just like I would be looking for worm eggs and cotton, digging around trying to find these dang egg masses. But what I learned was that sweeping only tells you so much of the story early on. And shaking also can only tell you so much. And that whenever you get into a bad situation like we had this past year, scouting once a week may not be enough. Because these things, they just fly so much, you know, better. It's not uncommon to, you know, most of your other stink bug species, they're going to migrate into your field edges. This one will too, but you're just as apt, in my opinion, to find just as many in the middle of the field as you are on the edges of your fields. So it's not one of those things where you can go out there and send your scouts out and say, hey, make 50, 60 sweeps right here next to the turn row. If you find anything, you know, we'll go forward. No, you're just as apt. 250 sweeps into a field, you may find them there. And you may not even hit them on the outsides. So it's just one thing to consider. Earlier detection is best because these can seriously sneak up on you, and so you've got to start sweeping these beans. And it's good to, I guess, from one perspective, that we're sweeping beans at R3 looking for bollworms, because if we keep that going, we'll pick up on these things at some point. But there's going to be a point before R5. I'd encourage y'all to try to get out there and start looking and using multiple techniques trying to find these things. That way you don't do like we did whenever it was 2010 and you just out there sweeping. It's like, man, they just came out of nowhere. No, they were there the whole time. We were just sampling wrong. I went over that. So 2016, we had a warm winter in 15, 16. We had this really long extended planting window. And we started, this was in 16, not 17, but 1st of July. And boy, doesn't this sound. Rains hampered scouting and spraying in August. 16 was a carbon copy to 17. You know, it was just, you could not have probably scripted it any way to make 2 years line up the exact same. I showed this picture at Short Course 2 years ago. I could have taken just as many pictures this past year. I've asked the entomology group what they think about this seed sprouting, if maybe the red bandits could be, I don't have an opinion, but I asked them, you know, what they thought, if maybe the feeding may be linked to some of this. Hard to say, but like I said, Angus may want to comment on that whenever he gets up here. But, you know, whenever you've got all this weather taking place with a bunch of stink bug injury, you know, it doesn't take too much for it to turn into a nightmare. And so, like I said, this was just some of the numbers in 16 that Richard and I had on our farm. I didn't want to talk about what product that was, but anyway, this was our numbers that we had. So, you know, you buy fentanyl and acephate, man, it knocks them down, but you give them a week later, it's going to climb back up. but the main reason I had this in here, just to show you what can happen in 7 day time period. You're going from basically one per sweep. You can get up here. I mean, it truly is remarkable how fast these things can take over a field. I mean, look, you're in bad shape at that point. You're above threshold. At that, you will not cut your beans if it gets to that. There's no point in it. And this was us counting. I mean, 87 per 25 sweeps is what we found. I think that was our highest number that we had found that year. And that's your immatures, that's your adults right there. And so, and we did not harvest those beans. We couldn't. So this was that particular area that it came out of. This, you can kind of see that line right there. There's a line. These beans are a little bit greener than these beans. I put that in there. This was sprayed 4 times, and this was sprayed twice prior to we let that test start, initiated the test. So this was sprayed twice already. You can even see the fringe area right there. And then you can see where these beans are trying to mature on down where we sprayed them. All right. You can't let them get behind, or you can't get behind. You've got to play aggressive with these things. If you're playing, to catch up, damage is done. I mean, I wish I could say that it was like cotton, where if you miss plant bugs a week, you can catch back up if you give it more time. You can't. I mean, once they do the damage, you're done. And so I'll back up. Those beans and this right here, on the pods, they looked about like that. You break them open, but man, you break them open, that's what it looked like on the inside of them. And so you can see, fast forward, we had cut these beans. Rich and I got those cut. We had gramoxone those beans. They were as green as the day they were whenever I took that picture 3 weeks ago. They're just got the green beans. So the 21 days after we gramoxone them, I took this picture. They just don't dry down. They just hung up and bad shape. Blaine Viator shared this with me. This is where, if I understood Blaine correctly, everything else had been sprayed the way it should based on threshold. For whatever reason, the high boy did not get turned on. They missed the second spraying. They made their first spraying, missed the second spraying, but made it up again when everything was being sprayed for the third time everywhere else. And it messed them up. And that's damage that's causing that to the bean. I mean, it's just causing the beans not to fill out and mature out. And so you get into one of those situations where, yeah, you took a yield loss, but you have, as I say, psychologically messed up that soybean. This is another picture from mine at Richard's farm. We get the luxury of being able to just turn off sprayers and look and see what happens if we want to. And this was, you can see me, I'm standing on top of a high boy right there taking this picture. This is in the middle field, Richard, 2 years ago, where we had beans, and we just didn't spray this right here. It's 16 rows or something like that. And we got the rest of the field sprayed. But this right here just, I think, maybe sprayed twice. But
I'm missing just one application also.
Yeah. And y'all probably saw this year. I call it picture frame in the field, where, this is at least brown, but a lot of times it'll be black. Just a black picture frame, I call it, around the field, where, maybe your airplane pilot couldn't get down in there, and your face turn on halfway around the field or something like that. But there's a border effect where you just didn't kill your stink bugs, and that's the reality. I wish that everybody had a ground rig and they can go around the fields and just bomb those areas like that. But a lot of times with an airplane, it happens every year. You're gonna get a phone call. Man, I got all this damage and we sprayed all this much. Well, I can tell you, this right here, you can't cut this stuff. I mean, yes, it will go through a combine, maybe. But the damage is going to be so much more in these beans than when you blend them into this. That's where a lot of it's coming from, because we're probably doing pretty dang good on this. But if this is 80% damaged beans, by the time you blend it in with this, you've got a problem. So we learned some lessons in 16. This wasn't even 17. Following a warm winter, red banded stink bugs start early. Probably need to just, have to change up everything you're doing from a sampling perspective. But you may want to incorporate a few extra things just to make sure, hey, where are these bugs at? Are they down low? Just be cognizant that, hey, you might be missing them with the sweep net early on. If you can, you need to address where the plane misses, near tree lines and power lines, because in a bad year like we just came out of, you really just don't even need to cut those beans because it's just going to drive up your damage. And now I said, you're not finished till the combine cuts the soybeans. There's data out there that says, you know what, maybe we can think about that. But anyway, I'm going to keep on. First spray may be the most important. I truly believe that, because that first spray is going to happen near around R5. That's whenever your greatest damage potential to your yield is going to be, and you've got to be on top of that. It would be nice if everybody would put out piles of water, because I think that's probably the best way to get these bugs killed. But, like I said, that may be wishful thinking too. Bifenthrin and acephate work. Some of these neonic mixes with bifenthrin are going to work good too. Belay looks pretty strong. I've never been impressed with Lambda on it. Not saying that you can't get some level of activity on it, but it's just not going to be as good as bifenthrin and acephate. One thing I've always told my farmers, if you're having to spray more than twice for this bug, you've got to anticipate some level of crop loss. It's unrealistic to not think you're going to have some level of yield loss, and it's certainly some level of quality loss. And I put in bold letters, this was 2 years ago, continue to scout spray after R5.5. And so I'm glad to say that, I guess this bug moved into a different habitat where other university scientists were getting a chance to look at it. Angus will be able to probably share some of this stuff, but like I said, I think there's some caveats to this that I'll get around and talk to. So anyway, this is what I prayed for in 2016. I prayed for a cold winter. That didn't happen in 16. I mentioned about planting early maturing varieties to try to escape some of this stuff. It wouldn't have helped in 2017 to plant an early maturing variety. I think that we already had the bugs in the system. They would have just pounced on the early maturing beans at R5. Communicate better with retailers about having enough bifenthrin and acephate, because you will spray them out of bifenthrin and acephate, and so we did better on that this year. Encourage farmers to get draper headers for green beans. All right, so 2017. This was a letter that Richard and I got from our local elevator, and so like I said, it was a carbon copy of the previous year. The rains devastated us. And y'all don't have to worry about trying to read all this. Basically, the point I was wanting to make. That being said, with the current market conditions, Big River will change its soybean damage discount scale effective at 7 o'clock Monday morning, September 18, 2017. Damage discounts will double from the previously published schedule. Any soybeans over 20% damage will be classified as salvage beans, and we will purchase them at a price to be determined. This was in response to, we basically had no good beans in North Louisiana. There was nothing to blend the bad beans with. And so and I don't know how it was in Mississippi and Arkansas, if y'all's elevators were similar to this, but the early beans got hammered with weather damage. I truly think there's some type of interaction going on with the stink bug damage that has occurred with this wet, nasty, humid, misty weather and rain that we get, that probably really drives up your damage potential in these beans. And so whenever you get something like this that they doubled, this was one of my farms. Of course, there's a lot of things going on right there in those beans. Some of it's stink bugs, some of it's disease, some of it's this, that, and the other. But so this was the damage discount right here. 2% or less, that's what you want. Normal years we get 0 cents. Hey, you're good. You get down in here, these beans right here would have been salvage beans. They were 22% damage. This is Donnell's down there in Tennessee. It was 22%. They'd been salvage beans. So a good bit of farmers, 6 to 10%. So you look at how this breaks out. 40 cents a bushel if you're at 5.1 to 6%. So at 6% damage, 60 bushel, that's 24 bucks an acre. You bump this up, and this is just how it gets. All right, you think about yourself taking beans to an elevator. There's not that much difference between 6% damage and 9% damage, 9.1. You go from $24 an acre on a 60 bushel bean crop of 6% to $62.40 an acre in damage loss at 9.1%. That's minuscule whenever you get down to it. Minuscule. And that's that much money to do to damage. Now, that's not all red banded stink bug damage. I want to clear that up right now. That's weather damage, but the stink bug injury that can occur during these rain showers, I think truly exacerbates the damage some. And so, considerations, I'm glad to say that this is probably, I hope this talk's a waste of y'all's time, to be honest with you, because I'm hoping they're all dead and we don't see this bug for another 5 years, but we'll all be better prepared the next go around. I think that's going to be, we've all endured the battle right now. And look, I promise you, for you guys in Mississippi and Arkansas, it's not any more fun the next time you're going to see them. I mean, you dread a farmer's phone call in September, a soybean farmer, because you just know it's going to be a bad news. It's like, well, the damage was this, the damage was that. There's no level protection for those guys with quality losses either. There's no insurance policy that they can buy to protect them against losses on insurance. It's all for yield. So a lot of revenue lost this year based on damage. So after our 6.5, in my opinion, and this gets back to what these guys were researching and everything, to me, these guys have figured out the yield equation on this. And I'm very happy that this bug migrated north and got into the hands of more entomologists where we can study this. I think after our 6.5, probably not even a yield issue. I think we've got this figured out. Whenever I would worry about them at our 6.5 is if we get a nasty 10-day spell of weather and it's raining hard, I just think the damage may be magnified some. Whenever you take bad weather plus red banded stink bugs, there's something going on right there. I think that's something that just to consider. But I think I applaud our entomologists for the work that they've done. I said I hate that everybody had to see it, but it was good that our paid entomologists got a chance to research this and figure out some answers and all this stuff. And Beverly said no. She had a smile on her face, but it was just kind of awkward. Angus was like, "Would you accept my rose?" And she was like, "No, I'm done." So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Angus. If y'all got
really that gray, is it?
Right. A lot of my stuff was after the weather came through. You didn't have to have the bad weather to have all the damage.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no weather damage, no fungal damage, and I still got 90% plus damage.
Yeah.
Where I didn't do anything.
Right. It's right. I mean, I think that's still the equation to figure out the damage part that's going to be happening late. And that's why I showed the damage rating right there. Is if even something at 6% damage, which now that was a doubled scale. So typically it was 40 cents at 6%, so it'd typically be 20 cents at 6%. Is where does that noodle in economically and stuff like that? That's a hard question to take, but it's got to be considered as far as, man, am I going to get docked? And is that going to be worth an insecticide spray to prevent the damage late? And that's where we're in Louisiana. If it's fixing to start raining, we're pushing it. We're fixing to kill them, because.
I'd be surprised if that scale goes way now.
Well, yeah, it's fixing to say, because we just had no good beans to blend with. So, thank y'all.
Appreciate it, Hank. All right, I'm going to hit